Hello and welcome to this recap of our fourth study session for the ACP 620, which focused on automations and integration. Automations are a great feature in Jira because they allow us to offload some of our work onto the system. Now, before you begin building an automation, make sure you understand what you need to be doing with that automation. Many people make the mistake of jumping right into building, and they end up with an end result that doesn't truly support their needs. So before I begin building any automation, I sit down to understand what my team needs to do, and then I write down step by step how it should happen. I tell myself if I cannot explain it to my team members so they could do it on their own, I can't automate it yet. This helps ensure that when I go to build the automation, it actually does what I need, and that I'm asking important follow-up questions to make sure it truly supports the team. Once you've figured all that, though, it's time to get hands-on. Automations do support templates, so you can go in and get inspiration, and if your company uses Rovo, you can use natural language to build automations. You can either do this to build it out entirely, or just to see how it works. Either way, it speeds you up a bit. However, you can also build them from scratch. Regardless of how you build them, they always have to have two things: a trigger that tells the automation when to begin, and an action, what it will be doing. You can have multiple actions, but you may only have a single trigger. Also, you can have conditions that control the flow of the automation, and branches, which allow it to repeat for some things, for example, on every subtask. Automations in cloud are limited to up to 65 different components, so the trigger is one component, one action is a second component, etc. So if you're more complex than that, you'll have to find a way to break it up. Additionally, the standard, free, and premium tiers all have a limit to the number of automation runs that can occur. This means you might have to keep an eye out on those automations to make sure they're running on important things and remove ones that you don't need. Those are some of the basics. There'll be a bit more as we go, but let's jump into Jira Cloud Premium so we can see what it looks like hands-on. Here we are in Jira Cloud Premium, and we're going to select a space, and then go to the three dots and go down to Space Settings. You do need to be a space admin to do this, and if you're a space admin, any automation you create will be scoped to the space it's made in. This means if I make an automation in the mobile program space, it will only work in here. Jira admins can make automations globally scoped or scoped to multiple spaces, for example, impacting multiple spaces at once. So if you find yourself making the same automation multiple times, go talk to your admin about changing the scope. Here I can see existing automations and I can filter through them if there's a lot of them. I can also see things like who owns them and enable them or disable them. At the top, I can create with Rovo using that tool to help out. And here I have my templates. I find templates to be a good source of inspiration for the exam. You won't be quizzed on templates, just know that they exist. I'm going to make a brand new automation though, and just show you some of these pieces. First, I have the trigger. This is what tells the automation to run. You can see there are many triggers. For this example, I'll pick sprint completed. Some triggers allow you to add conditions or more options to control them. In this case, I have to pick a specific board, and I can optionally add a condition. For example, only if a certain user is involved. After that though, I'll be able to add actions, more conditions, and branches. Here, I'll just pick one, in this case, telling someone that the sprint is done. Now, the action I select will have more or less options. So depending on what you need it to do, you'll have more ability to control it or not. Best advice is just to review the actions to see what does exist to give you ideas for what else you could do. From here, I can continue building out the automation by adding additional components. For example, after you send that email, then check some condition. Is a certain user involved? Maybe the user who triggered the event is a certain person. We should add a comment to the work item. This entirely depends on the homework you did earlier in terms of what does this automation need to do. So make sure you understand the process before you start building. From here, I'll just turn on this rule. I'll have to give it some kind of name, and then I'll turn it on. Once this loads in, you'll be able to add in a description. Please always do this. It tells other admins and your future self what this is for. Here we can see the scope. I'm only a space admin, so I can't change it from here. I'd have to go talk to a Jira admin to help me out. And then I have the owner. This is the defaulted to whoever created this, and it's who gets the emails if there's an error. So under notify an error, I say send me an error when the sync fails. Actor is also important. This is who shows up in the audit logs and in the history taking the actions. In this case, every time that email is sent, it will look like the automation for Jira did that. You could make this yourself, but that can be confusing because people will wonder why you're working on all these different tickets. You can also control who edits the rule. I typically leave this as all admin, but you can lock it so only certain people can. And you can also have this automation be triggered by other automations. This can be dangerous because you can end up in a loop of automations just triggering each other endlessly. At best, this slows things down. At worst, it can consume all of your automation credits in your instance. But from here, I'll update. And now we'll take a look at the audit log. I'm going to go back to my list of rules, and I'm going to look for the audit log tab. This keeps a running list of everything that has happened in automations. For example, this one had a configuration change. This one successfully ran. And from here, I can dig in and see what happened. This also tells me how long it takes to run, which is a very common complaint. Why does this take so long? The more automations you have doing more things, the longer it can take. However, if an automation fails for some reason, this is where you can go to debug it and understand which step in that automation may be failed. And this will give you a lot of clues into figuring out what could have happened. The other useful menu here is the usage one. This keeps track of how many times automations have run in the space. Now, this is important because free, standard, and premium has limits to the number of automation runs you can do. So you might want to keep an eye on this if you're in one of those paid tiers. So that is a quick recap of using automations in Jira. I'm curious your comments or your experience with automations. To me, the biggest challenge is a knowledge gap. What can they do? And making sure people get hands-on to learn about them. Share your comments down below. Also, make sure you check out the description for our Discord, the free companion course, and following sessions. Thank you so much for taking time to learn with me, and I'll see you in the next session soon.